Let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer. We are skipping the small talk today because the numbers we're looking at, well, they're completely redefining the UK this summer. If you follow British politics, you already know the ground is shifting. But the sheer scale of this earthquake, it is absolutely staggering. We're going to break down exactly what's happening, why the public is reacting the way they are, and the massive internal and external crises driving this whole thing. Okay, just look at this number. 245. That is the projected number of seats for Reform UK in a recent, frankly stunning, June 2026 electoral calculus poll. I mean, just take a second to really process that. 245 seats. This is not just some little polling bump, right? This is a seismic projection that literally threatens to upend the entire traditional Westminster system as we know it. Now, the really fascinating part is this dramatic inversion of power. Just look at how these numbers shake out. You've got Reform projected at 245 seats, the Conservatives trailing at 116, and Labour way down at 83. The analysts behind this data point out that the traditional left is deeply divided right now, and because of that, Reform is uniquely positioned to overtake both of the major legacy parties. It's basically a visual snapshot of the political establishment being turned entirely upside down. So let's move into our first section, what the public actually thinks, pulling the flashpoints. Immigration is obviously a massive driver here. A full 70% of the public currently believes the government is handling immigration badly, compared to just 20% who think they're doing well. Think about that for a second. That is a colossal, glaring disconnect between current policy and public approval. And, we see a really similar stark story when it comes to crime. 66% of people disapprove of the government's approach. When 2/3 of the country feels that law and order are fundamentally not being managed properly, well, you create incredibly fertile ground for political upheaval. Then, rounding out the top concerns, we have a staggering 74% saying the economy is being handled badly. Just 17% approve. So when you combine this widespread, deep-seated dissatisfaction across immigration, crime, and the economy, you get the exact formula that results in those historic, sky-high polling numbers we saw right at the start of this explainer. All right, moving on to Section 2, Tragedy, Tensions, and Tech, the microfactors. Recently, the incredibly tragic murder of Henry Nowak in a Belfast knife attack sparked widespread unrest, along with planned protests across the UK. And this terrible event immediately transcended local news, instantly becoming a central flashpoint in the national conversation about safety and borders. Now, the reason this became such a massive, volatile political issue really comes down to a few specific details. Police released information noting the suspect is believed to be Sudanese, arrived via Dublin, and, crucially, was granted leave to remain in the UK. That specific combination of factors just instantly ignited fierce political debate, perfectly colliding with the public's existing anxieties about immigration and crime that we literally just looked at in those YouGov polls. What this brilliantly illustrates is a massive transatlantic culture clash erupting in real time. Because the fallout from this tragedy, it didn't just stay within UK borders. It immediately dragged in the highest levels of US leadership and the giants of Silicon Valley, creating this fascinating, high-stakes comparative dynamic. US Vice President J.D. Vance actually weighed in directly, controversially blaming Nowak's death on what he explicitly called a mass invasion of migrants. He pointed the finger squarely at generations of European elites, claiming they completely failed to stand their ground. It was an incredibly provocative statement, pulling American political framing right into the dead center of a major UK crisis. In an immediate response, UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy pushed back hard on Vance's narrative. Lammy entirely rejected that framing, stating flat out that the tragedy had nothing to do with mass migration and telling Vance he was simply wrong. So what we're looking at here is a profound, incredibly public ideological split between two close international allies. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Keir Starmer is battling US big tech directly over how this unrest is being fueled online. Starmer is aggressively pushing for strict Australia-style social media restrictions for children under 16 and demanding Apple and Google ban explicit images. This has actually led to the White House urging the UK not to ban social media. At the same time, Number 10 has actively warned tech figures like Elon Musk to step back and stop whipping up division. It's basically a full-blown technological and diplomatic tug-of-war right now. Which brings us to Section 3, Internal Government Struggles, Mounting Crises. Okay, let's dive into the immediate internal crises that are actively rocking the administration. Right now, the government is facing heavy criticism over delays to the defense investment plan ahead of a major NATO summit, which MPs are warning is actively undermining the UK's credibility. But honestly, it's the next 2 points that are generating the absolute most explosive headlines right now. First up, the Mandelson files. Over 1,000 pages of Peter Madison's private texts and WhatsApps have been released, which, by the way, is just an exhausting amount of texting for anyone. And the contents have been devastating. These documents revealed stinging, very private criticisms of Labour MPs and Number 10 regarding his vetting and appointment as U.S. ambassador. It gives the public a really messy, unvarnished look at the internal dysfunction and disagreements happening right at the heart of the government. Now, adding to that internal chaos is a truly astonishing physical security crisis. A hidden camera was just discovered inside a highly secure government building in Westminster. And what makes this so incredibly alarming is the context of the building's shared use. This complex houses both the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government and the Home Office. Now, the Home Office is the department directly responsible for the UK's domestic security, policing, and immigration enforcement. So the potential risks of a breach here are severe. There is an ongoing, highly urgent security investigation underway as we speak to determine exactly who planted the device, how long it was there, and what highly classified conversations or movements might have been compromised. Finding surveillance equipment in the exact building where national security policy is drafted, that is literally an absolute nightmare scenario for the government. Smelling blood in the water, the opposition is moving aggressively. On the other side of the aisle, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch is promising to scrap the public sector equality duty. She argues that these rules have made public bodies institutionally incompetent, and she's vowing to abolish what she calls identity politics. This is clearly a calculated move aimed at winning back voters who might be tempted by those soaring poll numbers for Reform UK that we looked at earlier. All of which leads into Section 4, the next electoral tests. What happens next? The upcoming Makerfield by-election is basically ground zero for these competing political forces. It is going to be the very first real, tangible test to see if that massive electoral calculus data we looked at actually translates into real votes in a highly scrutinized local race. And just look at who's running. Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham is standing in Makerfield, and he is absolutely reading the room. He's running with a notably tough stance on migration, stating flatly that net migration needs to fall further. This is a brilliant strategic move, signaling his ambition to outflank Reform UK's talking points, while also potentially positioning himself for a future Labour leadership contest if the current administration starts to falter. So let's zoom out and look at the big picture here. Between the immediate pressure of the Makerfield by-election, the looming Senedd and Holyrood elections in Scotland and Wales this May, and these massive global shockwaves, like the Trump administration's focus shifting to a potential conflict with Iran, the pressure on the current UK political establishment is simply immense. They are quite literally fighting fires on every single front. So keeping all of these shocking polls, the internal security breaches, the transatlantic tech spats, and these massive flashpoints in mind, I want to leave you with this final thought. Is 2026 the year the traditional political map is permanently redrawn? The data strongly suggests a revolution is brewing, but as we've seen today, politics changes by the hour. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on the data, and I'll catch you next time.